you ask a powerful question. And again, your client goes into a reflective mode and gives you an answer. And then you listen. So there's this beautiful dance of insight and reflection and thinking that happens with these two competencies. And so they can really not be separated too much. But yes, for the sake of learning, we've decided that we will speak about each one of them one after the other. However, you will find that when we are speaking about one competency, we are making a reference to the other one. And that's because they really are very closely interrelated. Yeah, we will take questions midway, but if you feel that the question is too long and you are okay to wait, then we have allotted time for a Q&A, and then it would be best to bring it up there, because then we would have a lot of time to explain in a slightly more expanded manner. So if so far so good, then we are ready. Yeah. Ihab, may I start?
Please go ahead. I will be by your side.
Thank you, Ihab. So Ihab, tell me whenever you are not able to see a slide or something, because I'm going to be on video off, and I'm going to focus on the PPT in front of me. Okay. So like I said that in this beautiful dance of communicating effectively, we are going to first start with active listening. So if you look at the way ICF has categorized the competencies, this piece, which really decides how you are coming across as a coach to your client and to the rest of the world, is communicated with this one. This one works on the relationship, trust and intimacy. Your coaching presence really strengthens the relationship. This one is about leveraging the learning, the reflection, and the discovery that is happening in the client's mind. And that's how these are divided. We are looking at communicating effectively and active listening for the moment.
Can excuse me, but can you have everybody turn off their videos?
Can you have everyone join us?
Turn off the video, because it's blocking your pages. Everybody's got their videos on, but they don't need to have them on now, right?
Yeah, but if you make it smaller on your screen, then it will not block.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, just press minimize on the dashboard of the video or the Zoom.
All right, I'll do the best.
It will minimize it, yes.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here. Active listening. ICF has used about 8 markers here to talk about how does a certified professional coach exhibit / demonstrate active listening. I'm not going to go through this one by one, because many of you would have learned this or are in the process of learning it. But let's take a cursory look at this one. Attends to the client's agenda, distinguish between words and body language, encourages and explores feelings, perceptions, concerns, beliefs, bottom lines, and understands the essence of the communication. Here's the client's concern, goals, values, and what is possible and what is not, summarizes and mirrors back, integrates and builds on the client's ideas, and allows the client to vent so that the client can move from the situation on to next steps of how he would like to work with himself in the situation. Okay. So now my question to you all, and it would be nice if you can, just for the sake of your answer, just quickly unmute, give me the answer, and then mute back again. So we all know that we need to actively listen. All of you as coaches, what is it that you listen for when you are all ears, paying full attention, looking at the client with rapt attention? What are you listening for?
Generally, problem statement.
Okay, listening for the problem statement.
Tone of voice.
Tone of voice. Okay. What else?
I try to listen for what is unsaid.
And how do you listen for what is unsaid? That's a good answer, but how?
I follow through all the signals, verbal, non-verbal, silence, movement
Okay.
of body, eyes.
Okay. 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 Anything else? Okay. Is there something put on the chat that I need to look at? Limiting beliefs. Okay.
Yes.
Listen to feelings being expressed, concern, hidden desires. Okay. Physical signal. Okay. Very good. Very good. What
Listening to
else?
how
Give me one
the-
or two more. Yeah. Yeah.
Listening to how the client experiences his or her world, whether it's visual, whether it's auditory, whether it's through feelings.
Okay. Yes. In fact, you have given me two answers. One is how is the client experiencing the situation? That is one thing that you can listen for. And the second part is how does he learn? So the way he tells the story will tell you what is his preferred style of learning, listening, and experiencing, which is auditory, visual, kinesthetic. So there are two things there. Very good. Give me one more. So as students of CMA who follow the awareness, clarity, choice framework, when you listen and the client has just started telling the story, what comes up?
Presenting issue.
Presenting issue. Yes. Give me one more.
Expression of desire.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Those are the things that we really have trained our ears to look for, besides so many other things. That's what we begin with, because that kind of gives us some kind of a anchor to the conversation, and then we start exploring to find if there is more to the presenting issue. Yeah.
What is the emerging issue? What is the real issue?
What is emerging? What is real? Very good. Very good. Absolutely right. So when we are there, the skill of listening is about really being committed to the coaching, to listen for possibilities. Normally when one listens, or naturally people listen for problems, gaps, negatively focused mindset. We as coaches, while we listen to that too, we are also looking at how is this experience happening in the client's mind. And therefore, is there a possibility, is there a potential that we can explore with the client? Okay. I have divided listen for possibilities into three parts. Listen generously, listen for meaning, and listen unbiased. And I'm going to take you through each one of them, and we'll cover the entire gamut of various types of listening within each one of them. Ihab, feel free to stop me whenever you have something to add, like we had discussed this morning. Please add to what I am saying. Okay, so listen generously. The word generously itself will tell you that you do not reject any content. You don't dismiss the client's emotions. You don't listen with your experience, but you listen with the client's experience. So there's no filtered listening here. You take everything in. So what do you filter? Do you filter? Are you training yourself to filter some parts when you are listening? So while I say no filtered listening, but you can't take everything in. So what do you filter?
The noise.
The noise. Okay, tell me more.
You know, when the probably the client is trying to substantiate a particular situation, which
Okay.
may not be actually adding value to the expression of desire or a direction in which they want to go to.
Okay.
So that could just be a noise, because we may not need to consider that, which will hinder us from not guiding,
Good
to
point.
pointing out on the right direction.
Good point. But my question still remains, how do you identify that this is noise? Would anybody else also like to talk about the noise? That this data is unimportant to the story. How do you understand that this data is unimportant to the story?
Rina, this is Pawan. So, in terms of noise, it could be like the information which is just like example, but not really exhibiting the feeling or the experience. In sense of how the client is taking the experience in.
Okay.
So
you're talking about data and facts.
Yeah.
Right? Data and facts of the story, logical information of the story, which may really not help the client or you to be able to make any sense of the story. You filter that out. Okay. And what if the client is very anecdotal and gives you a whole lot of data? Okay, I will tell you what happens if the client is very anecdotal and gives only data and stories and is not really getting into the experience. Then what do you do? Let's first focus on what is here. So listen intently. One of the things that as a coach you need to learn, and it takes some time, is to learn to live with silence. So you ask a question and the client does not answer for some time. The client is thinking. It's okay to let him be in silence and let yourself be in silence too. Silence can be very eerie. Silence can be very, discomforting. But as a coach, if you're okay with silence, you're in a way gently pushing the client to say, think deeper, think more, increase your landscape. The map is not the territory. Can we expand it a little more? So ask a question, wait for an answer, and then be okay with silence. When you ask a question or when you empathize with the client, be careful that your empathy does not show up like this. I went through the same thing, the keys to get organized and let go of expectations. So you are listening with empathy because you want to be human and come across as human. But empathy does not mean that therefore you also jump and pass a judgment saying, I know what you're feeling, I know what you're thinking. To keep that completely aside. This is the one question that really comes in the way of good coaching and is your noise, not the client's noise, but your noise. What is the next best question to ask? Stay away from this one. Tell yourself, I will listen, and with whatever I hear, I will be able to frame my next question. I don't have to worry. Does anybody have a challenge with listening generously? Is there anything that you feel happens to you? Like we all know that when you drift, you bring yourself back. Is there anything else that happens?
So, Alina, yes, sometimes this noise about what to ask next, and how do I make sense of the client story happens, and that often gets me into thinking more about situational than experiential part of the client story.
Yes. So, very true, Pawan, and it happens to all of us. What do you do then? If you put on your curiosity hat at this point of time and really wonder, how is this client experiencing the situation? What's going on? How does he typically look at it? Where are his thoughts And how does he make his thoughts, how does he communicate those thoughts to me? If you start paying attention to that, you may move away from the situation. If you don't let your mind run to say, this could be the possible solution, then you will be holding on and actively listening. You will not run ahead in your head, and you will probably receive the client's message, the coach's message in complete totality. You remember that coaching is not advising or fixing, it's about facilitating their self-learning. So wait for that to slowly happen. More will come as I keep talking about what is it that you listen for. Listen for meaning. So what do you do for listen for meaning, which is what you have learned as students of CMA? When I say listen for meaning, what is it that you already know about listening for meaning?
Probably related to the expression of desire.
Yeah. So when you're listening for meaning, you ask, you pick up something from the client's content and then you ask a meaning question.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right? You ask a meaning question. Why would you ask a meaning question there? So that you ask a meaning question not because you want to understand what exactly is the client's story. You ask a meaning question so the client can make sense of the words that he's using, the language that he's using, and his mind is expanded, right? You listen for words, you listen for metaphors, you listen for the language. It's from here that your powerful questions will come. So listen for that. Listen, how is he telling the story? How is he expressing? Be curious. Look for the inner critic or look for the victim. How does the inner critic sound? Give me an example of how does an inner critic. There is an inner critic inside us, which you all would have experienced, right? Who criticizes, this inner critic of mine criticizes myself. And after everything that happens, I give myself some feedback saying, you didn't do well, you screwed up, you didn't come across the way you should have, etc. So how does this inner critic sound?
Like
I never succeed, I'm not good enough.
I always
do this. I always end up this way. Absolutely. So that's the inner critic which is there. So when you are listening to these statements, you must listen for, say that, okay, there is an inner critic here who seems to be a little too active. The minute you point that out to your client by actively listening, the client suddenly realizes that maybe I'm being too critical and can I take a different look at myself? So this is what you listen for. Look for the inner critic. And how does the victim sound?
Usually help.
He asks for help. Yeah, he sounds like a victim, as if he blames everyone else for what is happening to him. He doesn't know what he wants to do, what he should do. He needs to be helped. He doesn't seem to feel empowered, and that's the victim. So when you are listening, yeah, nobody understands me, nobody understands the situation, everybody misunderstands me. Yes, very good, nice answers. So when you are listening, you listen with curiosity, and then you look for, does this sound like the language of a critic? Does this sound like the language of a victim? The only little tip here is, the minute you recognize the inner critic and the victim, don't judge the client. Let him be. It happens to all of us. Stay away from there and ask your questions without judging or without making any interpretations or misinterpreting how the client is speaking. That's a very important line here. So here's an important, beautiful slide which talks of the inner critic, which is actually resisting the person to move forward, is resisting him to look at possibilities for himself, be positive, move out of the problem orientation and get into a little more of trying to find a solution and tell yourself that I can do it, I have it in me. And coaches find it very difficult in the beginning to be able to work with this resistance of the inner critic which is there. We need as coaches to, bypass this inner critic and, get to the real powerful person who is sitting there. And how do you see the powerful person? You see the powerful person when you listen for the who and not for the what. When you listen for values and beliefs, when you listen for his inner resources, then you hear the positive, and then to quieten the inner critic, this is who you call out to. Listen not for what the client did, but who the client was being when he did that. Don't listen with your values. How can somebody speak like this? How can my client doesn't seem to be a high or moral ground because he says these kind of things. Those are your values. Don't listen with your values. Listen with theirs. Listen with your heart and mind and what's their agenda. Listen for the who and not the what. If you remember in the beginning, first slide, I asked you, if your client is giving you too many anecdotes, facts, and data, how can you get out of it? That's when you follow this little tip here. If the client says, say for example, my team came and they were just not ready to listen to the ideas that I was giving them, and they were not taking an instruction, and then I did this, and then he said, and she said, and I said, and very factful story that comes out. That's the what that he's saying, what he did. Can you actively listen for the who? Who is the client being in this situation when he said this, did that, responded this way? That is the active listening. So I hear that you were a very patient boss today when this situation happened. Or I hear that you showed a lot of tolerance because you were empathetic to the fact that your team members can have a difference of opinion. You were being open and tolerant. When you listen for the what, and then you think in your mind, then you convert that into who the client is being. Once you know who the client is being, you are going to his values, his strengths. And the minute you bring his values and strengths to the table, the inner critic somehow quietens down. And when the inner critic quietens down, then the best self. What is my best self? That best self comes up. So resistance and resonance are opposite of each other. Resistance stops the client from moving into solution state, keeps him negative, sad, angry. Resonance makes the client dream of what he can do. That's when you move the client to be able to fulfill his inner vision, his desires. So the minute you are able to point out to the who, connect it to the values, sounds like being an empathetic leader is an important one for you. Sounds like being there for all of them is significant in your role. The minute you present it back to him, and in CMA we follow this beautiful one word called bottom line. You bottom line the client's experience. When you bottom line who he is being, you are demonstrating active listening. You are staying away from data, facts, etc. And you are able to move the client to his best self. So far, so good. I'm going to just pause here and invite my colleague Ihab if he wants to share something. Ihab.
Well, Alina, actually, to tell you the truth, we can't get enough from the learning. So I myself am learning new things as we always revisit these main pillars of coaching, the core competencies, and definitely having somebody as knowledgeable as you also sharing those insights, it's always a plus. So I'm gonna just share my 5 cents from a participant point of view here as you lead this. But what really baffles me about active listening is the way you can evolve as a coach, starting with trying to manage your inner self, listening to yourself first. And this is where you start. As you start your career, you are focusing on self-management and how can you just not listen to yourself and stop yourself from connecting to the story and the content of the client. But if the client, specifically if the client is sharing a story that you have passed by or you have experienced something similar to it, and then you evolve to the second level, where when you master this this muscle, you go to that second step, which is stopping yourself from trying to figure out what would be my next question and how can I better serve my client by asking him a question that is really powerful, that can add value, and you start really focusing on the client. And the last level, which for me that provides you more professional mastery would be not only the art of listening, but actually the art of not listening. And the first time when I came across this, actually, it was very hard for us to grasp it. But one good gentleman and a solid coach was actually sharing with me something, and I would like to share it with all of you. Is he compared the art of not listening? It's as if you are being the guitar strings, and the story is that the client is sharing with you is like the wind. And whenever that story has something important, all the wind will pass through the strings and no noise will come out. Once that wind carries something heavy and strikes the strings of that guitar, then you will start hearing that noise and you start reacting with your client. And the more I reflect on that metaphor, actually, the more I see is the muscle of listening would be amplified as you go up by self-management, your own emotional intelligence, but mostly is what you said, is having the ultimate level of empathy. Being able to draw these connections from the client story and having that intuition, the coach's intuition, to drive you as to what to ask next, and drive up, like, for example, listening to the values, which usually are not said directly. And you can play with them, play with the client, provide that safe space for the client to evolve them. So yeah, this is what I was reflecting on, Alina, as you were sharing on active listening.
Absolutely. More than Rakesh brought up a good point about noise, and I'd like to add to that one that noise, the client's noise is lesser, the noise in your own head is so high. So like one of the questions that the coach is most worried about is, what is the next best question to ask, which comes in the way of active listening. Another question that bothers his head is, how am I going to solve this problem? Which itself is a wrong question. You're not going to be solving his problem. He is going to solve it himself. The third question that bothers is that, am I going to make a great impression on him as a coach? I hope he's going to go back and tell the world that, hey, I had a great coaching session with so-and-so, or maybe, sign up for more sessions. And that so sadly comes in the way of you really doing your best. So the good part is he never learned coaching, you did. So you know the process. You know that if you stick to the process, you will be able to move him from the toxic mind state that he came with to a solution state. So just trust the process and your active listening will really multiply for yourself. That brings us to the one slide which actually has got to do everything with the client state of being. So we all know the concept of being and doing. Doing is action. Being is who they are being, or who they are becoming. And if you are able to honor this, who are they wanting to become in the process. So when the client gives you an issue, the presenting issue comes up, and then the focus statement comes up, and then the client wants to solve it and wants to win over that issue. The client is in the process going through a change of being. And if you are cognizant of that, what is this change of being that the client is going through? What is this transformation? What kind of a new person is he stepping into? And you are doing this with integrity, with authenticity, with your vulnerability. You're able to really be actively present there and make the client be, make your client make that shift. But for this, and I'm going to now take up from the point that Ihab said, your own state of being has to be a certain way. So for coaches, you all know that, I'm sure you all have realized as you stepped into the shoes of a coach, that your own self-coaching has grown. All of you would have in some way become a lot more reflective, become a lot more self-aware, become a lot more self-observant. And that's the state of being that you are going into. You don't do coaching. You are being a coach. The minute you don't do coaching, but you be a coach, you will learn all those qualities of a coach. So the state of being is applicable to the coach as well as to the client. Yeah. So I come to the kind of last one. We just talked about this, that people need to be, so when you as a coach are listening you listen for all these things which are there in the client's success or responsible for the client's success. They are his internal resources that help him to reach his full potential. When you are listen for this. Listen for persistence, listen for dedication, hard work, listen for disappointments and sacrifice. Listen for all those things which people cannot see. When you listen for them and then you bring them up for him, he will be able to naturally, creatively, and resourcefully find a solution. This is what you are looking for. Who is this person? Is he a hardworking? Is he a disciplined person? Is he being victim? This is what helps you to actively listen. And to summarize what I am saying here, listening at all levels, all the three levels. That is the top level and ground level. Acknowledging what you hear. I come back to this beautiful skill of bottom lining, which I think over the years now, I even bottom line, even personal conversations at home. Whenever I feel that the conversation has gone over 5 lines, I find myself unknowingly bottom lining to check my understanding. And if you are able to acknowledge and bottom line, when the client says simple statements, I must solve this, I have to get this done. Can you hear the must and the have to? You hear a determination there. Acknowledge. The minute you acknowledge, the client feels an injection of strength and energy into him. Hold focus. Notice when the client goes off track. Mirroring emotions. Very often, strong emotions expressed by a client makes a coach feel a little disturbed. The coach starts getting worried as to how am I going to handle that emotion. Don't worry. Don't make any judgmental statement. Just say, I hear you're feeling very strongly about it. What are you feeling so strongly about? That's being objective. What makes you feel so strongly about it? The client will tell you, this is not right. This should not be done. This should happen. That has to happen. Your values, your strengths, your belief systems start coming out. Bottom lining, getting to the heart of the matter. The beautiful habit of recovery. Recover when you are tuning out momentarily. We all do. It happens to all of us. Quickly recover and come back. And intuiting. Active listening is about intuiting. Sometimes when you hear 3 things over a span of 20 minutes, and somewhere in your mind, you're connecting them. There's nothing wrong in saying, presenting it tentatively and saying, I hear, it feels like, and intuit to the client. It's absolutely fine if the client disagrees. You don't get attached. Say, no, that's not how I feel. Great. So how are you feeling? How else? What is different? At least there's an invitation for the client to then express himself. Okay, so this is what we call as listening at all levels: verbal, physical, and emotional. So before we move on to the next topic, which we're going to be talking about, we'll just take a small pause here to check if you have any questions. No questions means 2 things. We didn't understand anything that you said, so we have no questions. Or what you said was very, very difficult. We're still reflecting.
No news is good news sometimes, Alina, which means it was crystal.
Okay, I see the messages here.
Another point on that is there is so much to absorb, like, and understand. And when I'm listening to this, I'm feeling like maybe I was tuned out. So it's very nice for being able to participate in this and reflect back. So the question always comes in mind is, how to get better at this. And I remember your point, like practice. And I think Ihab mentioned you need to practice that muscle. And once it gets built up, like you then able to naturally do this. So there's no question, but how to keep doing this is something which is important, is what I'm sensing for myself.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely right, Pawan. Being in the state of coach, being in the state of, I'm a coach all the time. So I'm actively listening, I'm bottom lining, I'm processing, I'm listening for experience all the time. If I do this, then when I'm actually coaching, I do a good job of it. Because you can't get a client for 24 hours, but you can, you talk to the world for 24 hours, right? So you can practice that there too. Yeah. So I'm going to, so questions are welcome. We also have a question answer session. So I'm going to quickly go to the screen again and then invite Ihab to talk about this one. Ihab, all yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Would you like me to share my screen so that I can manage the PowerPoint, or shall I bother you with moving with the slides?
No, sure. Whatever you want to do that. It'll take a second. You just go on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me see if I can do it from my side. Just bear with me one moment and switching programs. Okay, but in the meantime, I will just try to also add to regarding how you can exercise this muscle. And also I saw that there is a question on repeating the metaphor. Also, so I will use that time as well to answer that. So my advice is regarding how we can get better at this is not look at the core competencies as standalone competencies. Like today we are discussing active listening and powerful questions. For example, powerful questions cannot be powerful except if the coach is actually actively listening and being in the moment with the client. And on another note, active listening cannot be amplified, and it cannot evolve to where you really want that muscle unless you are able to actually amplify your presence with your client. And presence is actually a core competency on its own. Okay, and when you are connected with the client, your trust and intimacy actually will get also more solid. So these will become a base for your relationship with your client. But I would say, like, whenever you have the chance, and I'm sure that you're going to have lots of these sessions also with other great coaches that we have in the academy, they will be unpacking the different core competencies. My invitation to you is actually, and to you all and to myself, which I keep reminding myself, is coaching is a fluid process. Coaching is actually being in the moment, dancing with your client and being highly responsive. And for that, it's not a kind of a mechanical thing that you would have to worry about. It is actually mastering all the core competencies combined together. Because as you go more deeper in the core competencies, as you unpack each one alone, you would see that there are some markers which you would say, oh, I've already covered that in another core competency. How come it is there? Because actually they are all woven together. And that's what makes coaching beautiful, whether you are in executive coaching or you are in life coaching. No matter what your niche is there, these are the basic pillars that you need to have so that you are fully present as a coach and you are really connected with your client. So again, my invitation would be definitely practice, attend as much as CPD sessions that are being offered. Be with our great directors as they offer their experience in that area, and definitely as you move along and you join the advanced level, for example, and then later the mastery, but also in the advanced level, you get the chance to decipher and unpack each core competency on its own and see how it is reflected and have the chance to practice it, mold it, reflect it back to the client. So actually, these are the 3 steps which I can share with you so that you are able to master your active listening. Actually, on another note regarding repeating the metaphor, and I'm doing this as I'm trying to share my screen. So Alina, please just give me a little bit of feedback if you are able to see my screen.
Yes. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. So regarding the metaphor, regarding the guitar strings, so imagine actually you are the guitar strings, and as you know, unless you hit the strings of the guitar, you will not hear noise. Okay, so your listening would be like these guitar strings, and whatever the client is sharing, and this goes back to the art of not listening. Okay, the content, the story that is being shared, it goes smoothly through you. You are touched by it, but yet it doesn't strike a note for you to pose a powerful question on it, unless there is something of substance, of value that really touches the client. Okay, that it hits those strings, and at that point you are able to hear the music that is coming out, and this is where you are alerted that you need to ask and pose a question. And honestly, what can drive the power of these guitar strings and the sensitivity of these guitar strings is actually your empathy and your intuition as a coach. So the more you amplify your empathy, being connected with your client, the more those guitar strings get sensitive to know which bullets are actually making that music and which you would let go and actually not listen to. I hope it is clear now. I'm not able to see the chat box properly, so I hope that I was able to do that metaphor justice for you all. Okay, so moving along with the second core competency, I would like just to ask you, before we move along, I would like just to set the expectations clear and just ask you to take just 30 minutes, just write on the chat box, what would you like to know in active listening? What are the points that you would like to highlight most, so that we are able to make it more relevant to your expectations and your key takeaways?
Powerful questioning.
Just insert about powerful questions, yes.
Okay, you said active listening.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about powerful questions. Just the first thing that comes to mind, what would you like to benefit from our discussion now on active listening? Or you can put it on chat box, you can open your mics and say it. I can take notes, no issues at all.
I would be interested in your top 10 questions.
Top 10 questions. Okay.
Your go-to, you know.
Interesting.
For those times when you lose focus and get stuck, you must have some good go-to questions.
You will be surprised from my answer, but I'm gonna leave it as we move along. I'm gonna share my answer with you. What else? On powerful questions. Okay. All right. So how do you know that it's a powerful question? Interesting, actually, how would you know that it's a powerful question? This is what you're stealing one of my questions to you. So I'm gonna reflect that question back in a few minutes. Powerful question, the difficulty of not being judgmental. Okay, fair enough. All right, so moving along, going back to the slides that that Alina has just shared. As you can see, this slide reflects all the core competencies, excluding the codes of ethics, and it is very important that we understand that these core competencies are actually they are driven together. Okay, yes, each one has its own service for the coaching, like trust and intimacy and coaching presence. They enable co-creating the relationship, and which becomes the base, because if you don't have that relationship with the client, number one, you will not be able to focus with your client and actually be attending to the client's needs. Second, the client will not open up. So actually this impacts your questions as well, because when the client is not connected with you, the most powerful question would also pass by the client without hitting any note. Okay, so co-creating the relationship, knowing that you will get it in other CPDs, hopefully, the trust and intimacy, coaching presence. Then communicating effectively. Usually communicating effectively will be covered by active listening, powerful questions, direct communication. And then this is where you were able to deepen the learning through your questions, add value to your client by evoking that knowledge that your client needs in order to move forwards. And we move to the third category of facilitating learning and results, which are, as you can see here, creating awareness, designing action, planning goal settings, and managing progress. Okay, so as you can see here, trust and intimacy and the coaching presence are the base, and we move to active listening and powerful question, which, as Alina said, these are both core competencies acting in tandem. We cannot look at one without the other, and that's why the Academy selected these two to be presented together. Without active listening, as we said, we will not be able to base powerful questions to the client, because our powerful questions, as you remember, you always hear that coaching is actually dancing in the moment. Okay. And dancing in the moment means that your questions have to be responsive. And when we say your questions have to be responsive to what? It has to be responsive to what the client last said. And for that, active listening becomes integral in powerful questions. But as we keep saying powerful questions, I'm going to swing back the question that was mentioned in the chat box. And this is a question to you all. So what really makes a question powerful? I would like to see what you have to offer in that area. So if you would like, you can jump in, make it interactive discussion, or you can also pass it on the chat box.
I guess, or I feel, a powerful question is the one that will evoke, I'm stealing that word from what you said, to evoke the thought process of a client, which is not critical but reflective. So we are not driving the client towards critical reasoning of a situation, but to be more reflective about it, so that he can move vertical rather than linear thought process.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let me tell you, my friend, I'm stealing evoking from Ben actually as well. But you are absolutely correct. The more vertical you are, that means the more reflective you are being with the client. And you don't want always to talk with the logical brain of the client, because he's actually, this is the discussion that he's having with himself most of the time. Okay, it is how you open the door between his conscious and subconscious brain. This is where you are able to draw these connections. And powerful questions are the questions that enable us to open that door and evoke that power, evoke that new learning, evoke that a consciousness about what the answers that reside within the client. Interesting, what I can see on the chat box is any question that expands the client mind, absolutely. Makes the client think, mostly client think and reflect in a reflective mode. A question that is followed by silence and a change of energy, that's an indication that one of the indications that your question was actually deep for the client and allowing reflection, that it is being reflective. It's very important that for you to remember that the question that it's not always about the question that will create the aha moment, okay? Because early on, and most of the coaches who are actually with the client, they beat themselves up, okay, when they are always looking for that moment, the aha moment. Okay, it's not the question being powerful doesn't mean that it will drive the aha moment directly, because otherwise that means every question will have an aha moment, okay? But instead, it is asking the right question at the right time. And this is very, very important. Okay, and this will lead me back to the question that I just received early on, is the top 10 questions. And I'm gonna answer that in a few moments. It's very important that to know that we as coaches, it's not about what questions do we have in our pocket that usually work, because let me share with you, and I'm sure I've passed through it. Sometimes a powerful question with a client will not resonate with another client. And also if you are coaching continuously, you are coaching that client specifically, okay? Sometimes when you are coaching that client, you use certain questions in certain sessions. Sometimes the same questions will not connect and will not resonate with that client. And in this specifically, this is where presence is key, so that you are able to sense what you can create in the moment. And it's all about in the moment, the spur of the moment, okay? However, let me give you an example. If your client was extremely clear in sharing the story and sharing the meaning and what makes it important for him, would a question about meaning or importance serve the client? Actually, if the client has shared with you how important this topic is, how important this matter is at this point of time, and us going and selecting the question about importance because we know this is a powerful question, okay, actually this will backfire on us, because this will show that the client were actually not listening. We're not actively listening. So it's not about how complex the question is, okay, or whether it comes from a powerful list or not. The most important thing is to know and to feel that this is the right question for this moment. Okay, and this resides back to your active listening. You will not be able to know that this question, what will serve your client, until you are having active listening and presence with your client. I would like to share this slide actually has been shared by one of the best coaches on one of our trainings before. So it's learning by insight, not by intellect. And it reflects back to what one of you has shared a while ago. It is not asking question to the critical mind. I'm sorry, because I'm not seeing the screen. I'm not seeing the names so that I can know who mentioned this. But instead of talking to the brain, instead of talking to the logical brain, actually talking, being more reflective and allowing to draw connections with the subconscious, with the mind. A realization is the opening of the intellectual gate. Okay, so it's not about what you know now, okay, but it's actually opening up the gate for potential knowledge. Okay, and this is what will invite through knowledge as we move along. So this goes where you focus your attention, you make connections. Focus your attention on something new and you make new connections. I would like to ask you, this is directed to people, but let's put it in the context of direct coaching context. Okay, so this is by David Rogg on brain-based coaching. All right, so what do you make out of what is just being shared here? Where you focus your attention, you make new connections, or you make connections. What does it say to you? Just give it a shot on the chat box or jump in.
So as a coach, when I read this, it says to me, like, if I'm looking at, let's say, a situation, then I will make connection to situation. But if I'm listening to and paying attention to who the client is being and who the client is showing potential to be by their narrative, then I'll be able to make connection to that and have questions accordingly that will unfold them, their potential. Otherwise, it will just be a problem solving exercise. That's what I sense as a coach.
Beautiful, beautiful. You will not be able to evoke change if you keep focusing only on a solution-based approach with the client and asking questions to what is evident already to the client. It is actually when you are able to dive in and share back, share your observations, not only your reflections with the client, that you are able to allow him to focus on areas where he or she were not able to focus before, or they are actually mentioning them, but they are not able to see them, okay? Or they are reflecting them, or they are sharing basic values without being able to focus on them. It is at this moment where we actively listen and we share back through a powerful question. We set it and we put it in front of the client. That is, the client will be able to focus on something new. One basic point is when the client is actually focused on the issue and the problem. Sometimes they forget, they tell you they want results, they want change, but sometimes they don't even look at the bright picture, or what we base our training on is positive psychology, is actually evoking that hidden desire, allowing the client to focus on what is new for the client, what could happen, okay, what might happen, what he would like to happen. What positive impact will it have on the client in general, on his life? Because sometimes he's focused on that area, okay, that he's unable to see the beautiful picture that lies ahead. Let me see the chat box. Seeing the shadow becomes 3D. Absolutely, I love this, Radu, I love this. Attention, it's like projecting the light on something, and by seeing the shadow of it, it becomes 3D. I love it, and allowing to shed light is where the powerful questions come to play, where they allow you to shed light for the client. In connection to what we're just discussing is actually, I would like to share with you something about metacognition. And metacognition is, I'm not going to go too much deep in it, but just to show how you are able to guide yourself as you move with powerful questions. It is the more you are being reflective. So how would we be able to be reflective with a client who spent hours and hours searching solutions for his matter, or even opportunity? I would like just to drop here the opportunity, because clients will come to coaches not only with issues, okay? It's an opportunity that they might be looking at. One way to have metacognition play favorably for you in posing your question is actually allowing the client to reflect on the way he's thinking about it. Okay, so sometimes the client is not aware on how he's approaching that issue or problem, how he's handling it. So metacognition will open the door for you to actually allow the client to reflect on the way he's being thinking about the matter, the way he's handling it in the moment. Okay, his ability to notice, okay, the thinking process that is happening at the moment. So it actually, one of the things that we usually discuss is we want to be reflective with the client. We want to go into vertical learning. We don't want to speak with the logical brain. But what's interesting here is to share with you that sometimes as well, you would want to open that door, bring whatever the client carries in his subconscious or in his memories, and bring it to the prefrontal cortex, actually, for him to have visibility on it in the moment. So actually, the point here is to say that it goes two ways. Whenever you are able to go deep, bring forward to the moment where he's able to sense it, process it in his thinking brain as well. So it's a two-way stream going from the prefrontal cortex back to the subconscious brain, to the limbic brain as well, and going from limbic brain to the frontal cortex, so that the client is able to see, so why or how would I be able to consider this, and what needs to change or shift in me or in the way I'm thinking in order for me to move forwards with this, or to consider this new learning that I'm having, or that new realization. And that realization actually can happen in the process of metacognition is, I did then what I knew how to do. So this is the current status of the thinking, the way the client was thinking of it. Now that I know better, I do better. And this summarizes the whole process of reflection, going into vertical learning and bringing forward for the client to see what he needs to do around it. Now, if we connect this to the markers within the competency, okay, as you will see that we will see around 7 markers within the core competency of powerful questions. And let me invite you to see the first marker. It's explore way of thinking, assumptions, beliefs, values, and needs. So Alina has referred a lot into active listening is for us to see or to sense or to listen to what is not being said. And she gave examples on the beliefs and the values. And as I said, core competencies, you would see them directly built around each other. So the first marker actually connects to what Alina said in the active listening and connects to what we've just discussed in metacognition. Is, and as you can see here, explore way of thinking, allowing the client to explore his way or her way of thinking, the way they are, what assumptions they are holding in, what current beliefs they hold that is affecting their perspective. Okay, so it's not about what the client is only sharing, it's about what lies behind it. Because the way they are sharing the story is actually built on current thinking process, certain assumptions that they hold. Remember, your clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And when we talk about the client's wholeness, okay, we have to remember that the client is much bigger than what he's sharing with you. There is a big system that lies behind the client, okay? And it is his thinking process, assumptions, beliefs, values, support systems. And when you keep that in mind, this opens the door for you in order for you to amplify your listening and therefore drive your powerful questions towards the client. Looking at marker 2 and marker 3, it is allowing the client to have an expanded way of thinking about what, which is the situation, and about the who. And definitely, as you know, as much as you are able to reflect on the who of the client, and when you are able to build on marker 1, actually you are building on the who and caring for who is the client being in that moment, and how he's looking, what is the perspective that he's holding now, so that you are able to open a new doors, new ways of thinking. Okay, new ways of thinking that will allow the client to have a new realization and to move forwards. And the fourth marker is definitely helping the client to go beyond the current thinking. So once the client identifies, okay, the way he's looking at things, okay, then this will open the door for the client to realize new ways of thinking and actually bridge behind them. The three markers which are also included in the powerful questions competency are more related to the structure, and most of you have answered directly on the chat box what lies behind structuring powerful questions is asking questions which are clear, direct, open-ended, they are not leading, okay, and most importantly, one at a time. As much as obvious it is, we see sometimes the coach is worried if the client understands the question. So the coach tends sometimes to explain the question to the client and ask or follow it with another question. Definitely my invitation to you is trust your relationship with your client, and trust your client is naturally creative and resourceful. So this is what you need to keep in mind, so that you are able not to actually make it harder for the client. The more simple you are, the better you are. And definitely not leading questions and using the client's language, understanding where the client is and the way he thinks and the type of language that he operates with. All of these amplify the power of your questions. So in general, your questions, in order for them to be powerful, as we just said, the more evocative, the more reflective they are, the more they allow the client to check in, reconsider, reflect back on how he is now considering matters, so that this opens the door for a new paradigm shift for the client to move forwards. So at this point, I would like to open the door for all of your questions, so that we can play around with our knowledge on these competencies, and invite in Alina as well, in order to share her insights, and me and her would be available with you in order to share with you our view on active listening and powerful questions. Miriam, you're trying to say something? So I'm being conscious about the time, so I want to open the door for your questions, so that we can interact. Me and Alina would be here to support you. Alina, please go ahead.
I have a point here. One of the things that has come out in all your chats is that, how can I ask this question? How can I ask that question? So there's this, for those of you who have studied appreciative inquiry, there is this beautiful principle there called simultaneity principle. Okay, as the word goes, simultaneity principle says that the minute you ask the question, even if it may not be the best question to ask, and you know, we may not always ask the most perfect, most appropriate, fantastic question, the goodness or the not so goodness of the question is determined by the fact that the client's mind has started thinking. And if your question has led him to think more than what he already knows, and he pauses and doesn't give you an answer immediately, this means that your question has been good. And simultaneity principle says that you may hear the client giving an answer which is kind of away from the question that you had asked. And it happens. You are the client, but you never stop the client to say, No, that's not what I asked you. You don't do that, right? You let the client continue because you realize that the question that you asked has set the client's thought process, and he's actually exploring the entire landscape. He's exploring, he's thinking, maybe he will come up with something new, something that he just saw, something that just emerged as an understanding from him. That's good. That's a good question. That gives you a lead into how the client is thinking, and then you can go further there. So there is no such thing, like Ihab said, there is no such thing like a perfect question, but a question asked at the right time. So that's one tip on questioning that I would like to add to what Ihab had said. And the second piece, which we also teach to all our students, is that sometimes making an observation and presenting that observation to the client also is a kind of question, in the sense that I hear that you feel very strongly about it. Sounds like this is very significant for you. These are all observations, right? But you are presenting the observations, and it is a kind of question, because when the client hears this, he says, yes, this is significant, and 1, 2, 3 is also significant. So yeah, you've got to know what's on the client's mind, and you've not asked a question. It's not the quintessential inquiry question with a question mark. It's an observation. So sometimes that works too.
Absolutely, Alina. It's actually quite powerful. And as you reflect back to the client, and then you amplify it with your observations as well. Most importantly, when you invite the client to share his input on what you just shared, this is what makes it even more powerful for reflection. But what I would like to add with you as well is sometimes silence by itself is a reflection. So being for coaches to be really well acquainted with silence, sometimes just by being silent is a chance to allow the client to reflect back on what he just said and what she just shared. And sometimes it's magical. But the idea is that it's all based on your intuition at that moment. You would know the level of silence and how long you need to be silent with your client. It relates back to your active listening and your presence, your connection, your being with the client. Okay, if you don't want to use competency languages, it's just your being with the client, and the moment will drive you. But silence by itself is a reflection point, and a door to allow the client to reflect back. Great. So
I have a question.
What questions do you have? Yes.
So in a situation where you have a client and they're predominantly in the victim state, how do you, as a coach, navigate that to get to the part where you start to identify who they are or who they are being in a way that's more positive?
Alina, would you like to go?
Okay. Should I?
Yeah.
Would you like
Please
to
go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, many ways, actually, many ways. You hear the client saying victim kind of statements, you present them back. I hear you say so and so. Sounds like you are not feeling empowered enough to be able to face this situation. And I'm wondering what needs to change in the way you're thinking. I'm wondering what new perspective you are missing here. I'm wondering if there is another way of looking at this situation. I heard you say that you had these two strengths as you explained this situation. And I'm wondering, what is it that would help you to use these strengths to solve? A lot of ways in which you can move him out of this, I'm feeling like a victim, to say what needs to change in the way you're looking at it. Is there another perspective here that you may want to explore and consider? Yeah, Doreen, does that work? Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I just want to second that. And my immediate answer would be always remember that the client, as much as being the victim and living the past and living the current feeling that the client has. Always remember that the client has a more beautiful state that the client wishes to go to. And this is what Alina just shared in few examples, how you are able to allow the client either to open the door to shift perspective, or allow the client to consider that there are other ways to look at it without you being leading. It's purely what Alina just shared is actually neutral and allows the client to know that it's coming from within him or her. You know, so it's all about driven by the fact that we know that there is a hidden desire somewhere with the client. Sometimes certain clients, you ask them directly towards it and allow them to consider that beautiful future. And others who are being actually playing that victim on the hard part, you would go with the approach that Alina just shared with you, is allowing them just to start considering, okay, tapping a little bit on the current reality so that they understand that we can start shifting the way they are looking at it to look at a brighter future reality. Yeah, perfect. Back to you, Alina.
Here, yeah, some of you saw the markers here, and I know that you've got all very interested. In fact, this is our invitation to join the advanced class. It's at the advanced level that we look at each of the competencies at a much more deeper level, at a much more expanded level. We open it to see how we can be real professional coaches and demonstrate each one of these in the way ICF wants. And if you join our advanced class, or you can join any of those sessions that we have where we are talking about the advanced class, you'll be able to see how interesting it is. For those of you who are really excited by coaching, you will see that there is more and more and more to learn. So please come to our advanced class and you'll get to know more about these markers. Is there any question that is there? There was some questions on the chat about yeah, I'm also a little mindful of the time. It's been 1.5 hours, so I think next 5-10 minutes, and we'll try to, for those of you who need to leave, please feel free to leave. We are mindful of that. Those of you who still have a few questions, please feel free to stay. So I was addressing the question which one of the participants today had asked, that how can I make out what the client has not said? Which is a very good question, and it's something that makes you scratch your head that he didn't say it. So how will you expect me to hear it, right? When we say what the client didn't say, we didn't mean what he missed out or what he forgot. Okay, when we say that what the client didn't say, we mean when the client says, like I gave you an example, that I have to do it. So the client didn't say, I am determined. The client said, I have to do it. So you hear that who is there? A determined person is there. When the client says, how can anybody treat another person? Suppose he's speaking about a boss who's a little brash, and he says, how can you treat another person disrespectfully? How can you be rude? That's not done. Then he is saying that for him, respecting another human being or another person is an important value. So he didn't say it, but you can hear it, right? Yeah. Or when he expresses a strong emotion, then you know that he feels strongly about it. He didn't say it. He just said, I am so livid. You say, okay, you feel very strongly about it. And what makes you feel so strongly about it? So that is what we mean when you say what the client didn't say. Does that clarify? Any other question? Any other question on powerful questioning and active listening, both of them put together?
Alina, I have one question. In general, when I go by like active listening and then so much of clarification that's provided on powerful asking, I would tend towards that. So like I said, there is no other question, it's to absorb more material. But when I look back, what in general can I practice in day to day that will move me more towards this active listening and like it was put, don't do coaching, be the coach, right? So how to naturally wear that hat and then get into these situations where I can be like asking the right questions at right time, getting to more empathic situation with the client. What should I practice on day to day to get to that situation more effectively on an ongoing basis? Because like being a coach is not like a event that you do for an hour. It's a mindset that to shift, right? And that it stays with you. Like I think it was referenced, then it stays with you in your general life as well. So what is one thing that you would recommend to do on day-to-day basis to shift that mindset so that the right questions, the right listening happens automatically and naturally?
Well, I wish I had a one-line answer to give you, and I'm still myself on that journey. So we haven't reached the summit as yet. I think that when you are constantly working on yourself, when you're constantly working to answer your own questions, when you're observing yourself more than you're observing the others, the noise in the head quietens down, and then active listening or real presence or real ability to hold space for your client starts happening. When you tell yourself things like, I don't have to solve this problem, I will facilitate it, the problem will get solved. So when you work on personal faith, it starts happening. I don't know if that answer makes sense, but yeah.
May I add just one thing that as part of my personal growth journey, I was listening to one of the monks, and one statement that he shared, actually, he said, like, imagine the life, when you imagine the life of monks, you think that they are meditating 9 hours or 8 hours during the day. And what actually he mentioned, and I don't know if this will make sense to you, but it made sense to me in terms of active listening. He just said, actually, we meditate maximum 1 hour a day. And the rest of the day, we are not cleaning, we are not meditating. What actually we are doing is actually we are talking to each other in pairs. And we are actually focusing on each other, trying to be with that other person. Okay, and actually the point here is focus. So the more you are able to actually focus and exercise focus in whatever you are doing, okay, being able to practice it in your daily discussions, okay, forget about multitasking, forget about trying to hear everyone in the room. Just be conscious that you want to train yourself. Now I'm focusing on reading, focus with that reading. I'm talking to my wife, I'm talking to my kid, just focus on that person, okay? It doesn't have to be a coaching discussion for you to actually train your active listening. You can train it anywhere, wherever you are. So for me, that was the biggest lesson that I saw. It is actually the more you are able to be focused, the more actually you're connecting to your being, and you are actually being in that moment, being with that person. And Abara just connected with me. I felt that I need to share this with you. I hope this will add value.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Ihab.
One useful thing to do, look at the list of all the ICF competencies. These are competencies that you need to have towards your client. Turn it around and say, these are all competencies that I need to have for myself. Coaching presence, how present I am in life. Active listening, how much am I listening to myself? Creating awareness, how aware am I? You just turn it around to your own self, and you have a profound set of things that are opening up for you. You're well on your journey of coaching.
And Alina, I just don't want to sound to sound rude, because I received that question, what are the top 10 questions that I usually rely on? And I just don't want to leave anything unsaid, because I'm looking at it, and I don't know if I answered it clearly before. Yes, my answer is going to be a little bit of a shock. When I started coaching long time back, I thought that I need to have this list of questions that I need to refer to. And as I just advanced, I said that, yes, I need to memorize them because I cannot focus on reading. I need to focus on the client, you know. But with time, and as you go through your training, and as you will see when you go through your advanced training and your mastery training, and you get the chance to hear it also from Ben, I am known for, personally, I'm just answering from my own personal perspective, I like to improvise. And I am at my best self when I am in living the moment and improvising, because I'm really being, and I believe in coaching and the power of coaching. So therefore, there is nothing for me to memorize. There is nothing for me to carry with me. And there is nothing that I used to refer to as the safety questions, you know, when things go out of hand. When things go out of hand, there is nothing but to trust your relationship with your client. Okay, if you have a solid relationship with the client, and solid, I don't mean knowing the client from before. I mean, I'm meaning amplified presence, trust, and intimacy. Questions are gonna flow to you because the simplest question is equal. The simplest question which is asked at the right moment is equal to the most complex question and most powerful question you have ever read around. So that pursuit that I had, that I need to get the books, 517 best powerful questions, 101 powerful questions, I've dropped that long time back in the career. And as you move on, believe me, you will develop two things. You will develop this sense of synthesis. That means you will break down 2, 3, or 4 questions and you will synthesize them, okay, together and come up with your own version. And the most importantly, it will come as the beautiful you. It's gonna come with your sense, your being as the coach. It's your own flavor. So just to tell you, I honestly don't have my top 10 list. And if I want to refer, for sure, I'm going to refer to the questions that we offer at the Academy, for sure, because knowing and observing all the people around us, I can see the quality of our coaches compared to other coaches. There are great, magnificent coaches out there, but I'm always seeing that the ranking of our coaches is much, much better and bigger because of the rigorous training and the care that our directors have. And this goes back to the spirit of the Academy and the spirit that Ben is trying to put inside and instill in all the countries and all the coaches. But believe me, you will be able to come up with your own questions. Honestly, that's I don't know, Alina, if she has her own top 10 list, but honestly, I don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. No top 10 list. Okay, so I think we are at the end. Just one small little announcement. I'm sure I hope and wish and request you all to keep reading all the information that we send to you, the CPD information, continuous professional development, because that not just talks about these programs. We are also having in January the Mastery Retreat at Bali. This is a request to all of you to take the time out to read and do come there. It would be a good opportunity for all us like-minded coaches to really explore ourselves, to become better coaches, to meet each other in an environment which is non-virtual, relax with each other and learn from each other. So do look up on our invitations there. And if you want more information, please write to Maya. Please do come in for that one. Yeah. Okay. So on behalf of
Alina, if I may